What's up everybody, Liam Clistrom here for another eye-popping RedShift tutorial. Today we're going to turn into Kanye West and look at all of the lights inside RedShift. So let's hop in there and get started. Alright, now that we're in Cinema4D, let's go ahead and take a look at all of the lights. So I've got a few different ones set up here as there are so many lights that RedShift gives you. This first one here is an area light, and I'll talk more about area lights as we move down the list. But this one is just an area cylinder light so you guys can see what all the general tabs up here do. So if we click on that and open up the first tab, which is preview, what you're going to see is it affects your viewport, nothing else. So wireframe controls the wireframe in your viewport. So right here you'll see I've got my cylinder. If I uncheck that, it disappears from the viewport. So if you want to have your viewport cleaned up and just say have your axes viewable, that's how you do that. In this viewport here, you'll see that there's this big ball of light happening. I don't really like that. The way you turn that off is you uncheck Illumination and that goes away, so you just get your nice scene and its shapes. I generally like to have the wireframe on though, so I'm going to turn that back on. And this right here, before I turn that off, just adjusts how intense this is here. You can see that flickering over there. Wind that back a little bit and turn that off. So under general, I'll undo these two, is where you can start adjusting some color settings and intensity and things like that. So under color, you get your little color tab and you can set whatever color you want. So if you want it to be more blue, you want it to be pink, that's how you're going to do that. I'll go ahead and set this back to white. I personally like to use Kelvin. It's more mathematically correct. And so what's considered a quote-unquote perfect white light is about 6,500 degrees Kelvin. If you go cooler, or if you want a cooler light, you got to get it hotter. So let's say make it 106,000. So you get really blue lights. And if we go down to 500, you get really warm lights. And of course, you can just manually adjust that too to get it wherever you want. I like 6,500. Under texture, you can put in a gobo or an image to start having a grid on your lights and things like that. It's a good way to start to fake maybe like a softbox feel. So if you have a softbox that has a gobo on it, if you know anything about photography, a gobo is what goes over the lights and causes weird shapes like stars and grids and things like that. So that's how you can go about doing that. And then under unit type, you have all these different units. I usually stick with image because it multiplies really nicely. So if I do 1, 2, 4, 8, it just multiplies really nicely. Here is Luminous Power, which is measured by lumens. Here's Luminance, which is lumens with fall off is the easiest way to explain it. Radiant power is using watts. Radiance is using watts divided by ceridian, I believe is what it's called. And so that is the angle of something. So like the angle around in a sphere is a ceridian. So that's even more math. I don't like to do a lot of math, so I like to stick with image and watt. The only reason I stick with image is, like I said, it's easy to multiply by. If I go into watts and say put 400 for a 400 watt light bulb, that barely even shows up. I'm not even sure it's recording well. If I even go up to 4,000, you just start to get a little bit of light coming in. As my email pops up, sorry guys. So usually I stick with image and it just multiplies a lot nicer. And you don't have to multiply with even numbers. I personally think it makes everything render better if you just multiply by 2. So start with 1, go up to 2, 4, 8, of course. You could do 6 or 5 even if you want to really narrow it in. I just think things run better with even numbers. And then down here under decay is some more mathematical stuff. So inverse squared is how light falls off and how photographers, as I stutter over my words, measure light fall off when they're in a scene, or if you're working on set, you might have a measuring tape so that way you can accurately light your scene. So the way inverse squared fall off works is it's a mathematical equation of I, which is the intensity, equals 1 over the distance squared. So if you have a light at 0 and you have somebody standing 1 foot away, you would have I equals 1 over 1 foot squared. And you can do that for 2 feet squared, 3 feet squared, etc., etc., and it will give you the exact precision of how much a light is going to fall off based on the wattage you're using and things like that. So it's just the best way to be most precise with your scene. You can do none, and of course there's no fall off, so it's just blowing out the scene. And then linear, which you can control where the fall off starts and where it stops. The only real reason I can think to use that is if you're doing arc viz and you want to have really precise scenes and control the nuance of a shadow bending around a corner, things like that. That's where linear decay would be good. I always just leave it set to inverse squared because I have a design background and know how cameras and lights work, and it just makes sense in my mind. And I don't really have to do the math. I can pretty much know if I move something 1 foot further away, it's going to be exponentially more fall off than it was before and all that. So just keep that in mind. That's what all these terms mean, is it's all mathematically based. Then down here under area, as I said, it's just the shapes of an area light and controlling all that. I'll talk about that as we get into area lights in here. And so moving through, we've got some more controls. So how the rays of the light affect the scene. So right now it's affecting both the diffuse and specular. If I uncheck that, this light now only affects the specular of the scene, which is this highlight right in there. I've even got a fancy little pen I can show you. So these are all speculars right there. Clear that out. If I turn that back on, the diffuse comes back and you can see it starts diffusing away. Turn that off and now specular is gone. And then here makes a shadow catcher. If you've ever used that plugin before for standard or physical renderer, you can check that to start using shadow catching. And if you don't want your diffuse to go off all the way or your specular to go off all the way, you can just rein that in here by pulling this back all the way down to 0 if you want, or all the way up. Glossy controls the specular. You can see that start to fade away. And so that's one of the great things about having a biased renderer, is you get to control all the little nitty-gritty details of a scene. If we go into volume, you can see I've already got some contribution added in there. It's usually set at 0. I'll put it back to 0.25. And what that means is if there was volume in the scene, it would start to contribute to how much of the light rays add to the volume or make the volume visible. The quickest way I can demonstrate that is I've got a RedShift environment, and I'll turn that on here. And now we've got some fog in the scene just like that. So quick. And you can tweak all these settings yourself, and I'm going to do another video where I go over using VDBs and volumes and things like that. But if you are trying to figure out how to get volumetrics, you can go watch my God rays video. That's how we did it, and that was with an environment and some spotlights. And so very simply, you just have to make sure you've got some contribution under your volumes and your lights, and you can start making some cool atmospheric scenes. I'm going to turn this off again. Under shadow, you can start to control the transparency of your shadow or turn them off completely. So that's off. Cranked up here, all the way to 1, makes it 100% transparent. We'll leave it at 0 so we can have actual shadows. So photons and caustic and global illumination settings are under here. I already have global illumination turned on in my settings here, but if you want to mess with them a little bit more and not override them under your overall settings like I have, this is where you would start to do that. Caustics are the way light refracts through a scene, or sorry, through glass. Think of like a diamond, or if you have a glass of water, and how the water kind of disperses the light around the edges of the bottom of the glass. Or if you look at a pool or the ocean, the white caps and things like that, that's caustics happening. The best way I can show that is probably an image, which I'll throw up here. So it's just of a diamond, and you can see the light being refracted around. To get really accurate results, you turn on caustics. And then under project is if you're doing projection, so you can include or exclude objects in here. So that's the basics of a light. There's some other details down here which I'll talk about in a second when we go into the area lights, like visibility, bidirectional, and normalizing intensity. But for now, that's how almost every light in RedShift is set up. So let me turn this off, and we will go into our infinite light, which is the first one in the menu. So if you look under your RedShift menu and lights, here I keep mine docked down here. So if I click on this icon, I get my lights. So an infinite light is like the sun. So if I set this down to 90, you can cue some music of the sun rising. That starts to come up. So I was going the wrong way. Good job. You can see in the reflection there, the sun rising up overhead. So that's like noon going into the afternoon, except I'm going reverse. It should actually be going this way. So if you've ever used the sun or an infinite light in Cinema4D standard physical, same idea. And that you can see here, the K is grayed out because it acts like an infinite light. You don't get to control it, it just is what it is. And then under rays, you can do all the same things that we've already showed. So if you want diffuse turned down, you turn it down, and all that great stuff. Volume, if you want to have volume again, you can turn this back on, get some more volume in your scene, a little bit of atmospheric noise. So basic stuff. If you've been using Cinema4D and you're at a point in your career that you're considering third-party renderers like Octane and RedShift and cycles and all that, you probably understand what an infinite light is. Next up, we have a point light, which is like a standard light bulb. So if you look in the quad here, it's this circle here. And as I talked about earlier with the area light, the first breakdown one, because this is one size fits all, you can only have a normal intensity multiplier. And you have to multiply it a lot because it is just one size. And the reason that is I kind of touched on it a little bit before, is in RedShift, everything is based mostly on real life, as close as it can get. And so if you had a giant light bulb, this light would be exponentially brighter. But this is one size fits all, so it stays that same size. But say for an area light, you can control the X, Y, and Z of, say, for this cylinder. And so as that gets bigger, and I'll show it in a second, it gets brighter, unless you check normalize. And then that means no matter what size the light object is, keep the same intensity. And because a point light stays the same size no matter what, it doesn't get to be affected by anything else except for these multipliers here. So if you watch the scene here, the only thing that you're going to see change size ever is this fall off circle. So right now, I'll take away 0, and it goes down that small. You're going to see it getting smaller and smaller. As I add a 0 back in, the scene gets brighter and brighter, and the circle gets bigger and bigger. And that's pretty much your fall off or your decay right there. And as the light is about to hit, you see that specular get really hot there. So to talk about the normalization a little bit more, I'm going to go ahead and jump back into the first area light I had just to show you how that works. So I've got this cylinder here, and right now it's multiplying really nice because the cylinder is pretty big. But if I hit normalize, it gets dark. So I have to start cranking this number up to really get some results out of it. And that's because it's no longer taking into account the size of the cylinder. I can make this, let's say 500 by 500 and 2500. And you'll see that it's actually moved the center point of the light all the way back here. So that's why it got dimmer, but it's actually not taking into account the size as much. So if I move it closer, it's not getting brighter the way that you would expect the fall off to happen. So I'm just going to go ahead and set this back down to 50/50. And I think 2500 was, or 250? No, 2500 is where we want it. And we'll uncheck that, and you'll see now the intensity just gets completely blown out. Go back down to 4, and then we're back to normal. So uncheck those, and now we can start to talk about our spotlights. So I love using spotlights. They give a lot of cool theatrical lighting, hence the term spotlight, like a spotlight in a theater. So cinematic results. And to show you how spotlights work, if you've never used one, you've got the cone angle here, which starts to fall off. And you've got these harsh edges. And if you want to have an actual fall off, this is where you control that. And this will only go up to 75 even if I blow past it. And that's because this can open all the way up to 180 degrees, or just about 180 degrees. So if I rein that in here and then start bringing this back, now you'll start to see the fall off actually adjust, and these edges get harder there. And that's it. And so I've got this one set to radiant power, but you can do image as well and get all the same results, just like every other light. If you want to do volume, that's where you add your contribution there. Shadows, all the same controls are right there. The only thing that's a little bit different is you get a little bit more control with your shadows. So if you want your shadows to soften up on the edges here, how many samples, if you have a gobo, like I was talking about when we first started the video, you can have your softness affect the gobo. So some of the lights have controls like that under shadow. If I go back into the area light here, those are grayed out. So we'll turn this off and start checking out the other area lights. So first up, we've got what I call a quad, or it's just a rectangular light. I call it a quad because that's what it's called in Arnold. So under the area here with shape, we've got rectangular, disc, sphere, cylinder, and mesh. And it looks like I forgot to make a sphere one, but you'll get the idea. A sphere is a sphere. So rectangular, one thing I really love about RedShift is it's got these indicators on the side of the lights so you know which way the light is going. And it's just a rectangular shape. So right now I call this setup the David Ariev, if you've ever seen his videos and how he kind of directs his scenes. He likes to have really thin lights around his scenes to have really nice accent lights and rim lights on objects and get these cool curves of specular going on. So this is the David Ariev area light, and can bring that in a little bit. You can see as this falls off here, the light also falls off and follows those angles. And if I move this light here, nothing behind it is being illuminated unless I hit bidirectional. Now this light is actually lighting in two directions. So I can bring this here, and I have it targeted at the moment, so it will flip around. So you'll see that flip happen, but light is on both sides now. And of course you can affect your samples here, as I've talked about in the first video that I did. If you didn't see the first video, go do a search for that, either on my page or the Brograph page, and I go over a general overview of how samplings and materials and things work in RedShift. Just a quick synopsis of RedShift, not these individual detailed videos. So that's just a normal quad light. In here is a disc, and I bet you can figure it out. It looks like a disc. You can see the shape form in this area here, much more round. And if you look at the viewports, here's that. And so if you want a circle, you can make a perfect circle. I'll do 500 so you can really see that. Or if you want it more elliptical, you can blow one side out. And so now you get more elliptical style lights. So if you've ever been on a commercial shoot before, it's really nice to have this kind of control so you can have more professional lighting setups that you don't normally get out of applications. Like Octane's still waiting on a spotlight. And here's a cylinder, and I said I skipped over a sphere. Sphere would just be a sphere. I can change that. You can see it changed into a sphere. Cylinder is what I've got up here. This is the exact same light, just copied down here. And then another cool thing that you can do is use a mesh. So if I turn this on, I've got this light set up to use this octopus model there. I'm going to change my camera, unlock that, go here. And so we've got this octopus. And so for a mesh light, one thing that I love is you can either keep it visible in the scene or you can turn it off and it still keeps the shape here. So that's really fun to do. Kind of gives like a ghost vibe almost. So if there was like a ghost octopus hanging out here that was illuminating light that you could only see in reflection, it's kind of like a reverse light vampire, right? Anyone that watches Buffy, maybe? I don't know. Can't vampires not be seen in a mirror? Isn't that how you detect them? I don't know. My daughter likes Buffy a lot, so that's on my mind. So if we turn the visible back on, we've got the octopus back in there. Again, bidirectional, you can turn that on. I guess if you have it as a rectangle, I don't know why you wouldn't be using a rectangle or something that wouldn't be already illuminating bidirectionally. This is, of course, a rounded object, so it's going to illuminate bidirectionally. But you can have more control there. There's no normalized density for this one, so it's just all power-based, just like the spotlight. So it's not based on scale of an object, it's based on how much intensity you have coming out of it. We'll turn that off. And that's it for area lights. I'm going to turn off this octopus so it doesn't show up anywhere else. So if you really want to direct a scene, you've got all these first lights here. But if you are on a professional shoot and you have an HDRI that you've taken, then this is how you would do that. So you would throw in a dome light. So a dome light by itself, it's just going to emit a white sphere of light. I've thrown in an HDRI from Grayscale Gorilla using their link, and I talk about that a little bit in the first video, I believe. So you can watch how I set that up. It's really simple. You just kind of drag and drop it if you've got the plugin. And so all the same controls really. The only difference is you can start to enable some alpha stuff and different backgrounds and things like that. So I'm going to pop in here and get out of this view, unlock my camera so that updates. So right now I have my background turned off. If I enable that, it comes back and you see a lava picture, and that's because I've replaced this backplate here, which is really cool. So if I pull this out of here, it's just going to use this HDRI image as the light. Can rotate it around. Oh, you know what? I got to turn the backplate off. There we go. Can rotate around, get it lined up wherever I want. So let's say we want to have the light blowing out from behind here. Or you can turn enable background off, and then when you render this out, it'll just be an alpha as long as you have your alphas turned on. Or you can turn on a backplate and throw that in and turn enable background on. So now I've got this lava backplate back here. A lot of flexibility with your scenes. One thing to keep in mind is it's going to use the map image up here as your light source. It's not going to use the backplate. So if you want to have the backplate and this matchup, you would have to have the same thing. Of course, if you're doing that, then why would you even need the backplate enabled, right? So that doesn't make sense. So we'll just leave that there and uncheck it. So if you're working professionally and you're compositing and working with HDRIs, this is how you would go about doing that. Another way to do lights is IES. And IES stands for Illuminating Engineering Society. And what that is it's, I guess, the Illumination Society pretty much, where they have put out these data files called IES files. And almost all manufacturers have them for free on their website. That's how I got these two that I'm about to show you. And what they are is they provide the exact data that a light is gonna put out. So if you're working with an architectural firm and they have blueprints that say they're going to use the X500 light bulb by GE, then you could go to their site and look that up and then plug it in here and get the actual lighting for ArcViz. Like I said, I don't really do ArcViz style renderings, so I don't use IES that much. I do think it's pretty cool that you can get all that information for free from all these places. But just to show you what it looks like. I'm going to go into this setup here. So right now I have an umbrella like you would get from a professional photographer that's got an umbrella on their lights. That's what this first one is. If I turn this one on, it's more of a pear-shaped light, and I'll turn this off. You can see the shadows adjust to fit that there. And so that's pretty cool that instead of having to adjust your area lights and spotlights with gobos, you can just download these files there. I like to have a little bit more control, and I don't really do ArcViz, as I've said a few times now, so I don't use IES that much, but the option is out there if you need it. Turn those off. And then the last thing is using a portal light. So I've got this box set up with the light, and I guess it's not the last thing. I said it was the last thing. I forgot about the sun. So the portal light is really easy to use. I wish it was this easy to use in every program and rendered so easily in every third-party render engine. So the way this works is if you grab a portal light and you've got a portal or a window cut out, you would just fill that in here. So I've put that exactly where this cutout is. And I've said under the environmental shader right here to use this dome portal as the light source. And so what that is doing is saying, don't use anything else, just use the light from this. And I've turned off the effects diffuse and specular so it doesn't bleed into the sides of the box here. But if I turn that on, you'll see the light starts to come in around the edges, and then it will affect specular too. So we'll turn that off, and that way we just get the illumination. And then this light right here says only use the information that's coming through this box to affect the diffuse and the specular. I'll turn those back on. And of course you can control all the sliders here and the glossy there. And it's just that easy. So other render engines, I don't know why it yields such poor results and slowly when it's just so available right out of the box with RedShift, so that's great. Whether or not you're doing ArcViz, it's just nice to have that option to get more realistic lighting for your scenes. And then if you want to control it even more, you can control the power either under the portal light. So if I crank that up, it's going to use the data from the dome portal and multiply it here. Or if I go into the dome portal, I can do it here too. So if I crank up my exposure, it's going to affect the portal light too because it's pulling the data from that. So there's two ways to go in there, and you can really finesse your scene and massage it to get it the exact way that you want. So go ahead and turn off this, and we'll talk about the sunlight, which I bet you can guess how it works. It's a sun. So we've got a physical sun, and you can adjust the intensity here and how big the sun is, the turbidity of it, which if you look in the reflection is kind of how it's coming over the horizon there. The ozone, which, you know, affects the contrast a bit there. I don't know if you can go past 1. Yeah, it's only 0 to 1. Horizon height, which you can affect there. So all that fun stuff. If you want it blue, red, there's a blue-red shift, how much saturation is coming through, all that good stuff. If you've used the sunlight before, you know how it works, just like I said with the infinite light. All right, guys, so what is that? That's like a 20-minute tutorial, maybe 25 minutes on covering this. So if you have any questions, shoot me a message on Twitter. You can find me at _5, FIVE 31. Shoot an email over to brograph@brograph.com, and they'll forward me the questions too. And every week on Thursdays, we're gonna do a live stream on various platforms. So if you favor YouTube or Twitch or Periscope, wherever you favor, you can watch it. And we're gonna take questions. This week, we will focus on lights because that's what I covered. We're on for an hour, so it'll probably only take about 15 or 20 minutes to answer questions about lights, and then you guys can ask questions about using whatever else, so a VDB, or try and get Liam to make RedShift crash, or Why use RedShift when Octane has bloom settings and things like that, and I'll answer those questions. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Please comment below and like and ask questions, and I want to be your resource for RedShift for sure. All right, guys, thanks so much again, and I'll talk to you soon.